so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Utah Representative Blake Moore. He's here to look back on his first 3 months in Congress. Representative, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm glad to be here.
Boy, I don't think you could have picked a more wild and crazy time for your especially first few days and weeks in Congress. January 6th, the Capitol was overrun. That was within your first few days, like a day or two after being sworn in. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I've spoken on that quite a bit, and it was definitely a journal entry. Like you said, the start of the 117th Congress was like no other. You just have to keep a positive attitude, right? I was able to interact with and develop relationships, going through a really difficult time, both with my team and with other members of Congress, getting advice and navigating a pretty difficult situation. And the weeks that followed that were also were pretty unprecedented for the first part of Congress. So it was tough, and you learn a lot, and you get a chance to build on that from there. And I'll say our team gelled. I've got great relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, and you just have to look at the positives.
Baptism by fire, that's for sure. One of your first votes was on impeaching the President of the United States. I imagine that's not how you anticipated starting off your congressional career.
No, it wasn't anywhere near that. I was, in November, I was very much looking forward to what had just taken place with, the House of Representatives, the Republican. We didn't lose a single incumbent. You had many victories of colleagues. We had very narrow margin. And I think that the country was trying to tell Congress something that says you basically have an even split in the Senate, and you have a very narrow margin in the House. That's something we should have been celebrating, and that's not what we were focused on for those first 10 days. The impeachment vote was very tough. The objection and certification vote was tough, and I just tried to keep my objectivity at the forefront and kind of get past it, and then push really hard to get on the right committees. And that's what January ultimately was a tough first few weeks, and then the excitement of getting on Armed Services Committee, Natural Resources, good things that are really supportive of the district.
You mentioned you had to keep your objectivity. Let's dig into that a little bit more. As I mentioned, as one of your first votes, you joined with the other members of Utah's congressional delegation. However, some of your Republican colleagues did side with Democrats in voting to impeach the president. You were not one of them. Why did you come to that decision?
Yeah, correct. And like I had said in my statement, I even mentioned those 10 Republicans on the House side that decided to impeach. If you take nothing else from this, those folks felt that was where their district wanted them to be, in a lot of cases. And they made that decision, and ultimately it's going to be a positive for the Republican Party to have a diversity of thought. Our Utah GOP highlighted that when it got to the Senate point. But for me, I looked at a very similar framework when I was dealing with the objection vote versus with the impeachment vote. And the key piece was, these are high bars. Impeachment's a high bar. And in the House, you have to remember, there was no due process. Those that chose to impeach, those 10 colleagues, they struggled with that as well, and ultimately said, I want to use this as a way to hold President Trump accountable. Some of us, and I signed on to a censure resolution, and I actually believe that was a more constitutionally sound way to go about doing it. And so you had that debate going on quick. It was a 48-hour time frame that we had to make this decision with no hearings, no investigation that we were privy to. I remember the first briefing that I got from the FBI was on my flight back to Washington when I was just watching the news on 30,000 feet. So the House was a very rushed impeachment process. That's not a precedent that I want to set, and I wasn't going to set on my first 10 days, but it wasn't for a lack of not at least signing on to something that would ultimately have some accountability. I think that's important for our party to be able to step out and recognize that. And be that voice.
And you believe that's what the majority of your district wanted you to do, the approach they would want you to take?
I believe so, yes.
All right, you already kind of got into this a little bit, but maybe let's dig a little deeper into some of the biggest adjustments, your first 90 days. What are some of the biggest things you've had to do? I imagine a lot of that comes on the personal side with your family.
Yeah, and I had traveled a bit before this job, so we knew a little bit what that was. But yeah, that first 90 days, and there was actually more time in DC with everything that was going on than we expected. But we're on the family side, still making it to Little League games. We're working together. It's this role. There's something bigger to yourself. And when we decided, my wife and I decided to do this, we knew it was going to be, there's going to be a sacrifice to this, and we're going to make it work. Now, I also told Jane, do not judge this job off of the first quarter of the 117th Congress, because it's like no other. And we've had a really great 3 weeks back in district, and getting a chance even to go down to Bears Ears and getting out to Hill Air Force Base for several different visits and meeting with county commissioners and across the area. So there's redeeming days, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's definitely tough.
I saw you down in Blanding. We'll get to more on that in just a sec. But has anything caught you by surprise, either for good or bad?
You know, the importance of relationships plays, I assumed it was a key role. It's vital. When we are thrilled, our team, we're getting a lot of legislative opportunities that we're, today I actually introduced solo my first bill. We're getting these legislative opportunities, even though I'm in the vast minority right now, having lost the White House from our party and the Senate and the House. But it's important to build these relationships, and doing that and building the bipartisan relationships, that's how work gets done back here. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing the importance of that is probably one of my big key takeaways.
As I mentioned, I saw you down in Blanding last week. That was for Secretary Holland's visit to the Bears Ears area. The administration looking at potentially taking action again on that area and Grand Staircase Escalante. President Biden was the vice president when Bears Ears was originally designated. A lot of people look at that and say that probably gives us a good idea of where this is going to end up. You seem to take some optimism in the fact that she came to the area. How do you see this playing out? What's going to happen?
We're seeing in our world of politics right now, when people go back to their own corners, sometimes it's not it's not what was ultimately discussed. But I'm going to continue to be optimistic about the conversations that we were having. I'm really appreciative. Secretary Holland, she met with a variety of stakeholders, met several times with the tribe stakeholders and leaders down in that area, county commissioners, mayors, industry folks, and then of course all of the Utah delegation was able to meet with her over her 3-day visit, and all very well led by Governor Cox and Lieutenant Governor Henderson's team. Great, productive conversations. We connected on a human element, and we were able to communicate, at least from our perspective, we were able to communicate the desire for a legislative solution, because that's when you can actually make headway with this. And so it doesn't become just a back and forth. Utah residents, tribal members, everybody involved in this, we've got to come to a workable solution that is not just at the whims of whatever the White House ends up doing. And we were trying to communicate that as much as possible. So I'm hopefully that there's a legislative option, because with designating Bears Ears as a monument, it brings a lot more attention there. And we have to have a management plan in place with the proper funding and enforcement mechanisms to best preserve and respect that land down there. That's the whole point of a designation. And it can be counterproductive. And that's what I hope that members of the community, this is a hot issue, but if people would be willing to look and take it and take an all-encompassing look at it, just general residents, decision makers, everybody, like, we can do what a monument designation is designed to do, protecting the antiquities and still creating that balance that's needed for the public land. The majority of it's all public land regardless, and just being able to maintain that multiple use.
Representative, we have run out of time. We'll wait and see how this plays out, because a lot of people agree with you. It doesn't do a lot of good to just go back and forth every time the presidency changes parties. Thanks for looking back at your first 90 days. We appreciate it. Best to you.
Thank you so much.
Still to come, Utah's statewide mask mandate has been repealed for a week now. So how's it going? Our panel